Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. It's lovely to be back speaking to you all. I've got Chris returning to come and speak to us today, and we've got a newbie in Sarah chatting with us today, all about the very hot topic of sustainability. I mean, ESG is a phrase that I think we've all heard many a times in this modern age, and what we're going to try and do today is crunch it down. And focus specifically, I think, on paper and packaging and energy sectors, and just try and take a little bit of a chunk out of that sustainability word, because it's a very scary topic, I think, when you look at it on a broad basis. So we've got Chris Wall with us, who's a senior underwriter in our paper and packaging team in risk services, and also Sarah, who's our IT and energy expert and a senior underwriter for us downstairs. I think you probably all know who I am by now. My name's Lucy Stark, for those who haven't sat on a webinar with us at Atradius yet, and I'm the operations manager in our commercial department. So without further ado, I'm going to chuck it straight in here. I think to you, Chris. Let's come to you first. Well, we sort of consider you a paper packaging sector. How important at the moment is this notion of sustainability, for manufacturers, these guys working in this sector?
Yeah, I mean, it's of paramount importance, is the honest answer to that, Lucy. It's the USP that many companies will look at in today's market to try and differentiate themselves. I think it's probably worth recapping a little bit of where we've been and where we see the industry going, certainly for 24 and 25. The pandemic put everything on hold, and in particular, innovation within the industry went on hold. We saw between June 2020 and January 2023, the price of raw materials and paper pulp in particular double, if not more, in that period. And that put a real strain on supply chains. So the primary focus was more, how do we manage this cost inflation, rather than, what can we do to innovate and design a new product? Obviously, we all understand why in that period the prices increased with the pressures that we saw. But one of the big ones was freight costs, because a lot of raw material supply comes from overseas markets into the UK. And we are seeing a little bit more of that again now, because obviously freight issues in the Red Sea with rebel attacks, meaning going around the long way, is adding a bit of cost. So that's still there. And there are 5 challenges, I think, that we'll see for certainly the remainder of 24 and into the early part of 25. Not, you can never exclude some major geopolitical event coming from left field, as we know. But
we've had enough of them in recent years. We've had enough of them.
As it stands today, we would say, the foremost thing, and I guess this is where innovation comes into the market, is protecting your margin in a falling market. We've seen the boom of paper prices. It's now falling back. And it's very easy for businesses to say, well, we'll pass this cost on, because it's the market forces that are driving this. When the market's falling back, naturally consumers say, well, you drop the price now. So protecting that margin is going to be a challenge. And that's very much where innovation will come in. Because if you have a product where you say, okay, but look at what this product does for you rather than what it costs you, then you're in the position where you can protect that margin. The second biggest thing we'll see, and again, innovation dovetails into this, is e-commerce. We all know there was a massive boom in online shopping during the pandemic. And while that has abated, it's still higher than where it used to be. We wander down the high street on a Saturday morning. It's not the destination it used to be. And supply chains have adapted to this. So you see more innovation and more sustainable focus now on packaging, rather than point of sale material and stuff like this. So that's been a big shift. The biggest part where innovation has played its most significant role, if you like, in the sector, is a move away from boxes. And it's a bit of a dichotomy, really, because we'll talk about the closed loop later in the webinar this morning. But, boxes are very standard in the sizes they come in and what they look like. With the shift to online retail being more prevalent, bags and the packaging material used within bags has become more and more of a focus. Historically, it's been very, very difficult to recycle plastic packaging in that sense. that's where innovation has gone in to make sure, for example, the label, the glue that holds the label to the bag can easily be separated. So that bag can be recycled. I never knew until recently. I always wondered whenever you buy something off an online retailer, is why is it black inside? Why, if you look in the inside of the bag, it's black. And the buyer in question said to me, well, it's simple. You deliver the goods, but you may have to also receive the goods back inward in returns. And the bag is designed so you can just turn it inside out and you have a plain plastic bag.
Well,
that actually shocked me. I was like, oh, you don't need to scribble the labels out, just turn it inside out. And that's why it's black.
every day.
So you have black bags. So see, I have some contribution to these things.
You are.
And even saying that with plastic bags, a box is still one of the most prolific forms of packaging that we see in the industry. The use of a box and the fulfillment of a box is becoming more and more prevalent. I think I mentioned it probably on the last webinar. IKEA are the masters at getting everything into a box and leaving no space. That for logistics companies now, that's becoming more and more of a feature because it's cutting down on the waste, therefore you burn less fuel and you have less carbon footprint. And the last bit to always remember is that, medicines, pharma and food to an extent will always remain resilient. But again, we are seeing more and more innovation in there now where what customers desire is, say, for example, a blister pack. It has to keep the medicine at the right atmospheric pressure and the conditions. That's a real barrier to entry. So innovation is absolutely paramount in the industry.
I'm going to throw you a curveball question here, Chris. What's cheaper, the plastic packaging with all the innovation or standard boxes?
As it would stand today, standard boxes, because they are vanilla.
Cheaper, yeah.
Yeah. And the issue I have is, they are usually brown in colour. There's no deviance from that. They are standard sizes. So once you set a machine up, I mean, certainly some of the buyers that I speak to, they set a machine up, they will run one size of one configuration of box for maybe a week because it's not put together as a box, it's flat packed.
Yeah.
You can stack them high in a warehouse and they run the next size. That's why, I know Amazon take a lot of criticism for this. You buy a USB stick, it comes in a box this big with, but that's why it's the standard configuration they run. It's still cheaper to run a cardboard box at the moment.
So just you touched on closed loop production just now a little bit earlier. Do you want to just kind of go into a bit more detail for us on that?
Yeah, I think when we look across the industries, many industries have always had some sort of recycling element or closed loop production process. And what do we mean by that? Well, we take a product that's been used for a specific purpose and basically we repurpose it. We break it apart, we chop it up, and we redesign it in something else. And the idea is you put as little virgin material in as possible. In other words, it goes through the loop and it goes back in, and it just goes round in a circular motion. Forever a day would be ideal. And while that's not what happens in the ideal world, obviously in the real world, that's what we'd like to, But the way that most people define it now is, closed loop production is a means of growing the economy while preventing the depletion of natural resources. That's what I know. Sarah will touch on energy consumption a bit later. But product innovation is key to that. And, we're not just talking about a box that can just be sort of recycled into something else. We always have the one where a box is taken and it's put into a different form of packaging. It's becoming more and more prevalent now, particularly in the food sector. And for several years, we've always seen buyers struggle in the food sector where, say you have a cup, that cup that holds your coffee will often be laminated. It's very difficult to separate that lamination away from the paper fibers. So that very often means that cup, it's not actually recyclable. Where the innovations come in is actually, if we get it to a certain temperature, it will come away, but not to the point where the coffee will melt that glue. So it's the little tweaks like that really are, driving the closed loop production now.
Excited actually, because you think you would always, you'd chuck something in the bin, you wouldn't even think about it, and now we've got split recycling and all sorts going on.
Yeah, I mean, we see it, don't we? In Atradius, we separate all our waste out now because of the Welsh Government directive. It says you must, and quite rightly so. But to the average consumer, you all think you're doing the great thing by putting that in a recycling. It may not actually get recycled. That's the, you know.
Really, really interesting. I mean, can you just kind of chat to us then? You mentioned about the Welsh Government directive there. Are there any other legislations on the horizon that you know of for packaging, or where are we from a incentive perspective for businesses to innovate and make these changes?
Yeah, I think there's a twofold element to that, Lucy, to be honest. I think let's go back in the supply chain. Legislation will also come in, I think, with the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto agreements we've had in the past. Don't get a lot of the virgin materials for packaging is paper, which is trees, essentially. So, you know, there's legislation in that industry that's also having a knock-on impact in the packaging sector, particularly if you look at the big exporting market to the Baltics. You know, there is legislation on the horizon that says, actually, you know, you can't just keep cutting trees down. There has to be a sustainable way of doing this. There will be more focus on how much is recycled. Putting it to the UK perspective, the big one obviously is net zero is something a lot of companies try to attain. I think it's a difficult challenge. The big one we've seen in terms of legislative change in the UK is the ban on single-use plastics. So, you know, we all, and again, you know, it's a talking point, but we can no longer have plastic knives and forks. You now have wooden ones. And now that causes a bit of a debate in itself, which is better.
We've all had that debate as well.
From my point of view, and the rationale behind it, which is the question I often get asked, because they both come from obviously natural resources. Of course, the wooden ones can be recycled easier. That's the, you know, there are some retailers now, food retailers, that you can actually throw them in your compost heap and they will break down. So that's the top bit. But that one singular change caused a massive ripple effect in the entire industry, you know, and although we've been coming for a while, it did have a material impact. As we look forward, I only see more and more legislation coming in that says, you know, convenience is not the mantra of the day now. It has to be about the holistic approach.
I think it's probably fair to say it isn't just paper and packaging. I think we're seeing this across all industries, really. There's a real pressure, I think, on businesses, us as individuals, to really start thinking about our carbon footprint, you know, sustainability in general. I'm going to leave you there, Chris, in case you get a sore voice, and I'm gonna throw this over to you now. I mean, energy expert, I guess I'm just gonna straight in there and ask you: do you feel like there's, you know, enough of a focus on sustainability at the moment? Could there be, you know, we've said about little bits of legislation, could there be more incentives that, you know, government or industry bodies could bring in to kind of encourage more of this innovation and this sustainable behaviour, do you think?
Yeah, well, certainly in my opinion, you know, ESG in energy is, in the energy sector, is very prevalent. You've got, you know, some really big players that are ambiting, you know, a lot of fossil fuels, and for their credibility going forward, and for their sustainability, they absolutely need to be making a shift in sort of showing the market and their shareholders and just the wider sort of, you know, economy, okay, that they are making these sort of positive moves for sustainability. So, for instance, you've got the likes of sort of BP and Shell looking to sort of sell off their sort of what you'd call sort of dirty part of their business to refineries, and that in itself then is sort of leading the way to show that there is sort of, you know, a big positive move for those businesses. And equally, they have to then be diverse in their portfolio of trading going forward. So you're looking at them investing in solar, in wind and carbon capture, for instance. So, you know, carbon capture is very new, and I'm sure that's going to take some time to be, you know, to be up and running in terms of when you look at wind and solar. There's lots of sort of wind solar farms around. So, those bigger players certainly they have it's their credibility on the line as well. But energy, it's just prevalent. They absolutely have to be at the forefront of, you know, making things into being sustainable. And for instance, that's another sort of big, a big sort of business. They recently announced a 300 million project in a cool day, and that will then in turn produce electricity. I'm not going to profess now to say that I know the ins and outs of that particular project, but my point is there is innovation already in sort of the energy sector, and they're probably one of the leaders in innovation, I would say, as well. So yeah, there's ESG is a huge piece just across the board. You look at us today as a credit insurance business. You know, we're making our employees fully aware of our sort of ambitions for sustainability, be that through sort of, webinars internally, and as we pointed out in terms of just sort of us and how we sort of recycle and sort of adhere to local sort of legislation in Wales as well. So yeah, I think definitely a huge piece going forward. There's going to be continual innovation in energy for sure. And in terms of sort of incentives, I think it's a difficult one to sort of go into in detail. There's clearly tax incentives for these companies. There's been sort of more and more push, a better push actually for tax. If you're sort of innovating and you can show clearly it's to be more renewable and sustainable, then there's for a whole year, you can have 100% of that taxable. Whereas it's normally 18% over periods of time. So yeah, so that there are some incentives. However, if you've got a big piece of infrastructure that's going on, that's already taxable in that year at 100%. So I think there's probably more incentives that could sort of come further down the line. There are also grants available for businesses. But again, it's not easy for these businesses to go and just ask for a grant from the government. They have to go through various sort of rigorous sort of framework on an application form. So yeah, there are incentives out there, but I definitely feel sort of, in my investigation into this, that there could be more, incentives available for businesses, especially smaller businesses. Because they haven't got the sufficient capex behind them or capital to be able to push forward with such things.
That's it, isn't it? I think, Chris, you were talking about the innovation in packaging, and because that innovation now exists, it's easy for a small business to just say, right, I'm not buying plastic cutlery anymore. I'm buying, for energy. It's a different ball game, isn't it? It's not an off the shelf that you can that anybody can just pick up. So that's a really good point you make, say. Just another question from me on that then, say, do you think there's been sort of an acceleration in the bits of innovation that you were talking about because of the Russian sanctions? Or do you think we were well on a trajectory to kind of, getting offshore wind farms, solar, before, this crisis?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. We were certainly on some track to making a shift to being sort of reaching the original 2030 sort of delivery of the UK government's sort of predictions to reduce our carbon emissions. But yeah, definitely the Russian sort of sanctions and whatnot, yeah, absolutely pushed forward our sort of commitment and definitely accelerated our requirements to protect ourselves going forward in that area. So, a very unfortunate situation, I think, has brought about that acceleration and that sort of need to turn it on again. I think people got a little bit probably complacent, and I don't think there was probably sufficient capital in the markets to push forward the innovation and the requirement for renewables. So yeah, I think it was a positive, as I said, after a very sort of tough situation.
You mentioned just now as well about the 2030 target, reducing carbon emissions and everything else. I mean, the UK government have got this net zero 2050, crazy, whatever you think about it, whether it's achievable or not. I mean, are there any milestones that you think we can kind of hit to get there? Just on a, because obviously energy is the biggest contributor, isn't it, going to be from a sustainability perspective for hitting that target. Can you share any thoughts that you've got around that target?
Yeah, well, I think certainly my thoughts, obviously, you've got the Paris Agreement, 192 countries committing to being net zero by 2050, a huge task for any country. And I think, when you look at the UK, we committed ourselves to a very ambitious plan of sort of meeting a reduction. I think they wanted sort of a 68% reduction in our carbon emissions versus where we were in 1990. In the 1990 level, so a huge sort of driver to get there. And that's by 2030. And that's being sort of delivered with various measures. Two in particular would be people would know about would be the diesel and petrol cars, sort of not being, they wouldn't be allowed to be manufactured going forward. But more recently, under Rishi Sunak's government, he announced that he was pushing those sort of up to 2035. So clearly we weren't going to hit where we needed to be. So in my opinion, I think that was a clear indicator that we were behind the curve. And equally, I think he was sort of putting forward as well, those particular measures being put in place were going to hit the individual's purse very hard.
Just going to have a quick look in the chat to see if anybody's sent in any questions while we've been chatting. Right, Chris, I'm going to throw this one to you. Somebody's asked the question, how key is product innovation to sustainability? I know we've spoken about it a lot, but do you want to just kind of add your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer sufficient to just say we produce a box or we produce packaging et al. You have to do something different. You have to differentiate, and innovation is the key for that. If you look from the biggest players in the industry right the way down to the smallest businesses, they all have innovation at the forefront of their minds. And I visit a lot of buyers. I go out to see them, and I won't name the buyer, but I walked into their reception a couple of weeks ago. They had an innovation area to the right where they showcase what they try to do in packaging. But it's also a place where they invite customers in and say, we've developed this. Can you help us make it better? So it's integral now to any customer and buyer relationship. It's of paramount importance. And I guess, in a way, that's where we come into it a bit as a trade credit insurer, because what we tend to see is innovation very often starts with somebody who's academic. I hate saying that, but it does. And then you say, well, you've got this great product. Are you going to bring it to market? And that's where sometimes, certainly for us as a traders, you listen to the story of a buyer. So yeah, it may be a business in its infancy. It may be it has a very relatively small balance sheet. It may have only been in existence for 18 months. But if you're talking to that individual and you understand their business plan, you understand their concept, you understand where this product is going to fit in the industry, then that's where we say, well, actually, we understand your financing, we understand your banking, and that's where we can support. And I think that's a real challenge for us, is that very often the innovators don't understand the financing that goes behind unseen. Everyone knows of the bank. Everyone knows of, PE backing, private equity backing. Very rare that people think, oh, actually, I need to trade credit insurers on board. So in a nutshell, innovation is the key and will be the buzzword for several years to come yet, because, we've still got the environment out there that's suffering through, actions that we take as consumers.
And it's interesting because as you were talking then, I was thinking, are they being forced to innovate because of consumer choice? When you think about the retail world, you get something now, and it used to be a combination of paper, plastic. A lot of it is all paper now. So we are, as consumers, influencing kind of business decisions as well, which is really positive. Right, let's have another look. Oh, we've got a good one here for you, say. Is there a future that we can contemplate living without fossil fuels? That's a very philosophical question from somebody this morning. They've had their coffee, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is a very big question to ask. And I would say, in my humble opinion, it is both crucial and challenging in equal measure that we consider a future without fossil fuels. I can't see in my lifetime personally that we will we will live without fossil fuels, because you look at our world economies now and how it sort of functions with fossil fuels, fueling cars, airplanes, shipping, industry. So those things are always going to be required. And as we say, you know, as businesses innovate and you have renewables and you have carbon captures, and I think we'll always have to have fossil fuels. It'll just be offset by a very different renewable source that is sort of, offsetting just the carbon, the sort of carbon net zero position we need to be in. But to give you scale, in 2022, as a world sort of economy, 80% of the of global energy consumption was related to all of those fossil fuels that I've just sort of highlighted. So, you know, if you think now, 80% now, and we're in 2024, and we are supposed to be moving to a net zero position of 2050. And when you read the headline net zero, we are never going to be in a position of no fossil fuels. It will be, as I said, offsetting various other renewables to counteract the continual requirement for fossil fuels. So yeah, I think there's going to be, there will have to be a shift, but comes that will be funded, and as Chris said, with the innovation, you need private equity and various other funds available to be able to do this. So, I think it's going to be quite some time before we will see, a major shift. I think it'll be very incremental, personally.
You hadn't, considering it was such a big question, you handled that very well, Sue. Well done. Right, I'm just going to pull out this last one then. And we've got somebody who's joined us here today that's asking, who has the biggest chance to improve environmental factors? Accumulatively, us as consumers or the big players? So that's quite an interesting question. If I throw my personal opinion out here, I think it's got to be a combination of both. I'm going to sit on the fence right from the beginning. There's a lot of people in the world. We've spoken about how consumers drive behaviour. I think we can all have our impact in our own way. But I think we've spoken about incentivization and different things today. I think the big players have got to be leading the way. I mean, what do you guys think? Throw in your opinions.
I think you're right. I think the big players have to, because if you look, for example, at the fast food chains that consume a tremendous amount of packaging that's just thrown away. Yes, they do. If you go down the personal route, I mean, people often say to me, who would you have as a guest at a dinner party? And my immediate first response is always Sir David Attenborough. Yeah, I think he's an absolute legend and a national treasure. You look at the changes he's seen in his lifetime, as a broadcaster and reporting on the natural world. It's devastating. It's such a change, and every year we get the sort of, it's 2 minutes to midnight, and it's moving closer to 30 seconds to midnight. A group of scientists who have dedicated their life to the world are saying, got to slow down. Temperatures are rising to a point where there is no return. Consumers have a choice, but we are led in those choices so often. So it needs the big conglomerates to say, actually, we're going to do something about this. And then as consumers, we may follow. So I think my personal view is it has to be driven top down, because if you go from the bottom up, you just won't get the traction and the volume you need.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Chris, on that point. Yeah.
Lovely job. Great. Well, we're just about up to time. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having a mix of the technical and the personal today. It's been a nice change. If anybody's got any questions, do please feel to email us if you've got any questions or you'd like to go through anything after the event.